Problems, worries, sadness. Are you seeking solutions?
Bible says,
Do not be anxious about anything. Instead, pray about everything. Choose faith over fear.
Welcome to Vital Signs, your prescription for a healthy family, where members of the Catholic Medical Association explore medical topics vital to the health of you and your family members. I'm Dr. Tom McGovern, the host of Vital Signs, brought to you by Shalom World TV. Today we explore a topic that will be near and dear, or maybe not so near and dear, to the hearts of many viewers: childhood discipline. If kids only came with an instruction manual, but they don't. Joy. It's the reward of living life well, which means living a life of virtue. And we Catholics desire ultimate joy for our children, which is found only in heaven with God. The book of Proverbs gives us advice on forming virtuous children. For example, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. Or, hear, my son, your father's instruction, and reject not your mother's teaching, for they are a fair garland for your head and pendants for your neck. And finally, do not despise the Lord's discipline or be wary of his reproof, for the Lord reproves whom he loves. So how do modern parenting trends such as helicopter parenting, the demanding discipline of the so-called tiger moms, or the focus on entertaining our kids exemplified at venues such as children's museums help or hinder the training, teaching, and discipline advocated in Proverbs? Joining us today is Dr. Kathleen Berchelmann, a pediatrician from Connecticut who not only sees children as patients, but who co-founded and runs with her husband MyCatholicDoctor.com, a telemedicine platform providing virtual medical care around the United States. Not only does she understand childhood training as a pediatric specialist, but also as the mother of 7 children. Kathleen, welcome to Vital Signs.
Tom, thank you so much for having me.
With my wife, we've been intentionally raising children to prepare them for heaven, not Harvard. The book of life is more important to us than the dean's list. So what recommendations do you have about forming a healthy perspective as to the reason behind all of our child training and discipline that we do as parents?
I think the most important thing to fall back on every day in your job as parenting is that God created you to be these children's parents, right? He didn't choose somebody else. He chose you. And he's going to give you the strength to do it. But parenting is the ultimate course in humility. And parenting brings us closer to God through that humility. St. Teresa of Calcutta said that humiliation is good for humility. And there's nothing better than parenting to bring you that humility.
So Kathleen, what do you think are some of the current problems with modern parenting, especially in the global West, that seem to go against the accumulated wisdom of millennia of child rearing that's taken place on our planet Earth?
I think we can look at the example of our Father, God, and in Jesus Christ, and how he created behavior change, and through the biblical history of how God the Father disciplines his children as an example to us as parents, as we live in and are in charge of our own domestic church, right? Which is what the family is the domestic church. Today, what I see is this huge trend towards positive parenting solutions and people who use no negative reinforcement in their parenting. Also, a movement towards what some people call helicopter parenting, but in a business world we call micromanagement, which is just exhausting to parents. And that's also a big change, and that's happened very recently and tends to occur in smaller families and wealthier communities. So these two things, positive parenting, leads parents and I'm all for positive parenting, we'll get into this, but positive parenting without any negative reinforcement leads parents to try to micromanage kids and be helicopter parents because what else can you do to try to control their behavior? So I try to remember how God the Father taught us through salvation history that he uses positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement and virtue training. And that's what we're called to do as parents.
Well, let's dive into some of these. There are a lot of different terms that we hear used related to what we do as parents: raise, train, parent, discipline. And many view the first three on that list as positive, and the last one, discipline, is negative, like you said. So, what are the important distinctions between these four terms? And are they all an essential part of being a parent?
I do think that they're an essential part of being a parent. And the hardest part of being a parent is to discipline your children. And discipline doesn't always mean, we'll go into the different kinds of discipline. Certainly doesn't always mean corporal punishment, just means, the hard reality of parenting, doing what you don't want to do. And as a parent, helping your child do what they don't want to do. That's what discipline is. It's teaching your child to brush their teeth twice a day, even if they don't want to, is a form of discipline, right? And so when we enforce discipline on our children, we actually help ourselves be disciplined as parents, and we grow in virtue ourselves. And I think this movement towards positive parenting and no negative reinforcement, I think it comforts the parents more than it comforts the child, because the hardest thing to do as a parent is to discipline your child. And so if you just say, we just do positive parenting and no negative reinforcement, you're letting yourself off the hook. You're the one that doesn't have to live through the pains of disciplining a child.
That's a great realization to admit, Kathleen. So, to the topic of discipline, what are some forms of discipline that parents can use to help build the virtue of fortitude in their children that will be so essential to their living as adults?
Fortitude is something that comes over 18 years. And the first thing to say is that I'm not a perfect parent, and nobody is, right? And every child is so different. And I think we just keep working day by day by day on fortitude. And the more you build the virtue of fortitude, the less negative reinforcement you have. So you start when they're really early. I think toothbrushing is a good example, right? You really got to teach these kids they have to brush their teeth twice a day, even if they don't want to, even if they're too tired. And if they go and brush their teeth and then ate a cookie, they got to go back and brush them again, right? And when you teach this kind of fortitude in a 2 and 3-year-old, then when they're 5 and 6, and you're saying, actually, you have to put your own books in your book bag, and you have to get up for school by yourself. It's constantly building on these daily habits many times a day. And the same thing with chores. Every household has chores that need to be done. But today I see so many parents giving their kids minimal chores, because it's more work to make your kids do chores than it is to just do them yourself. And it's very easy to come up with an excuse. Oh, my child has so much homework and they're so busy with all of their very important extracurricular activities that I think, actually, let's just give them the night off chores. But it just takes fortitude on our part to assign chores and be consistent with them, and really, really make sure those kids do those chores on a schedule every day. But that's building the fortitude. It's that kind of fortitude and routine that they're going to need to have a healthy marriage and to be parents themselves.
So it sounds like that we build the virtue as parents while our children are building them as children. That's something I hadn't realized before, but that's wise. So along with fortitude building comes the concern for parents, well, I might be destroying something important, which you pediatricians call attachment. Attachment is supposedly an important part of the parent-child relationship. What does attachment mean?
So attachment is a term used for a healthy relationship between parent and child, or child and caregiver. And children who are subject to abusive relationships will have unhealthy forms of attachment to and children who are part of a healthy relationship are going to be intimate with their parents at the right times, and also be able to leave their parents at the right time and at the right age.
So attachment is important. And parents, especially in America, the modern West, think that praise is important. But how much praise is too much? What's too little? What's just right? What's the Goldilocks solution here, Kathleen?
I wish I had a formula for you, Tom, but there isn't a formula. Every child is really different. There's some children for whom they need a ton of praise and reinforcement, and that child, it's the child that feels deeply, loves deeply, is easily hurt, very sensitive, and that very sensitive child is also a very loving child. And chances are that child needs lots of praise because they are very sensitive and they hurt deeply and easily. There's other children that hear praise and think, okay, good enough. I'm off the hook. I really don't have to sweep this floor any better because mom said I did a good job. So tomorrow I'm going to try doing it like not quite as good and see if she still says good job. And then the next day I'm going to do a little less and see if she still says good job. Right. So, constant praise is actually hurting that child. Right. So you really have to go child by child. And this has a lot to do with temperament. And I know that that's one of your favorite topics also.
It is, but that's good that you tell us it needs to be individualized. As any parent knows, with more than one child, they're all different. So, Kathleen, you mentioned before about kids helping out with day-to-day tasks and chores. What is a good way to get our children to help out with the day-to-day life and chores of the family?
A key piece here is schedule. Children thrive on schedules and adults do too. And you also have to be on the same page with the rest of the caregivers in your house, which is you and your spouse and anybody else that helps you out, babysitters, grandparents, etc. If you have people helping you that don't want to stay on your chore schedule and don't want to follow your pattern of parenting, get rid of them. Really, you're in charge, you're the parent, it's your domestic church. And if your nanny says, I'm going to do it my way, get a new nanny. If mother-in-law says, it's my way when I'm babysitting, don't use her as a babysitter. You really all need to be on the same page and on a schedule. So, for example, our family has chores every day after dinner and then chores on Saturday. And there's a chart on the wall, and the kids at this point all have it memorized by age 3. But if there's somebody else there, they can, like a babysitter, they can look at the chart so they know what chore to enforce with each child.
Schedule and repetition, consistency, those all sound like wonderful points. They aren't real attractive, but they work. So discipline often requires negative reinforcement when the positive isn't working. You've mentioned that before. What are some common mistakes we make as parents when trying to effectively apply negative reinforcement? In other words, how do we sometimes undermine our own efforts?
Well, you don't want to enter into a battle of wills with a child. And it's important not to discipline when you're really angry. If you're really angry, it's probably best to step away from the situation. First make sure everybody's safe, then step away from the situation. And I usually end up, when I'm really angry, I scream for my spouse, like, you handle this one. because he's more level-minded than I am, and he'll manage the immediate situation, but we have a chance to step away, talk about it, decide how to handle it. But then you don't want to enter into a battle of the wills where the child really is just interested in showing that he is in charge, right? What you do, and you're just interested in saying, I'm the mom, I'm in charge here. That's not going to work. What you want with discipline is to build virtue, right? That's the goal. So you've got to really step back and make sure that's your goal. Then try to think of disciplinary strategies that are going to build virtue. Like I said, routine is discipline. Doing chores on routine, brushing your teeth on routine is discipline. Then when kids are breaking that routine, when they just say they're, stomping around and saying they're not going to sweep this floor again, it was good enough. That's when you say, oh, you need more practice. I think you need to do the dining room too, kitchen and dining room. And then, if they start throwing a fit, we use a lot of timeout, but timeout, again, is meant primarily to take them away from the situation, to calm down so that you're not entering into a battle of the wills. And timeout is not meant to be like a really negative place. Like, I put kids actually in the bathroom because I find the first thing they say is I have to go to the bathroom. And there's no screens, there's no TVs, and you just sit there and calm down until you're ready to keep sweeping the floor. And I'm also not afraid to put big kids in timeout. I told my 16-year-old about a week ago, he was giving me trouble. I was like, all right, well, you can go to timeout. And he looked at me like, Mom, are you crazy? I said, 16 minutes. And that was it. He did his work. I use timeout. We also use essay writing as an effort, especially with older children, as an effort to really make them reflect on what they've done wrong, especially if they've really disrespected someone and aren't admitting that, or repeat something that's really repeated, like not respecting his siblings' things and using his siblings' things without permission. And I needed him to calm down and reflect on the fact that he wasn't respecting his sister. And so writing a letter of apology to his sister where he clearly states that he didn't respect his sister's things and that he's going to make effort to change this was the disciplinary approach that needed to happen to build virtue. And then we always try as much as possible to follow it up with confession, because God's mercy endures forever, right? And then they have that opportunity to really release the sin and feel God's mercy.
Well, that's a great segue into what I was going to ask about next. I mean, confession, yes, it has a great role, especially as Catholics, but you mentioned mercy. So what is the role of mercy in parenting, and what's the difference between being merciful and being a pushover?
I had a 6-year-old patient of mine, actually, who told me that mercy means second chances. And I love that definition of mercy. And a sweet little girl, I don't even think she was Catholic, but she is, gosh darned it, right. Because God's mercy endures forever. That means he gives us second chances again and again and again. He gives us 1 millionth chances, right? And as parents, we're called to do the same thing, as painful as that is sometimes. But second chances doesn't mean that you don't learn from your past mistakes. In fact, as Catholics, we know that a priest can't grant absolution unless your best effort not to repeat the sin, right? The same thing is true as parents, that we're not going to just, be merciful to our kids unless they're making their best effort not to repeat the sin. Even if their effort is very small, we still have to have mercy. But you have to see that effort. You have to encourage that effort. You have to tell them they need that effort. But we keep trying. We never give up on our children.
Kathleen, I've noticed that even in our circles, some parents think they need to intervene with a child every time there's something uncomfortable or difficult in that child's life. How can we as parents learn how to balance when to intervene and when to let our child be?
There's no easy answer to that, but I think it takes stepping away from your own emotions, like taking that breath in the moment and really trying to figure out, am I the one that's uncomfortable here, or is it my child that's uncomfortable? If I just want them to be comfortable so that I can be comfortable, maybe that's not the right choice. If there's really something that can be learned here, then I need to consider letting them learn that.
Kathleen, a lot of parents kick themselves and blame themselves for their children's bad behavior, and they have a hard time believing that they aren't responsible for most of it or all of it. How much of a child's behavior is related to the good or bad decisions that mom or dad make?
No one can answer that question for sure, but I think it's much more much more nature than nurture. And when I had my first 2 children, everything they did wrong, I blame myself for. And I was going to try a new parenting intervention. There must be a solution to this, right? And now on number 7, I feel quite differently. I mean, when you look at large families, you see 7 children. I know you have 7 too. You see all these children so different, despite the fact they're raised in the same house with the same married parents, with the same house rules and the same chores, right? The same structure, the same prayer life, the same sacraments, the same priest. And these kids are so different and have such different needs, and their behavior is so different. And I think the Lord uses these different temperaments of these different children for us to grow. It's our salvation that's at stake here, perhaps more than theirs. It's all these different challenges that are purifying us as parents as we try to figure out how to deal with each one and grow in virtue and humility ourselves.
That's right. It's our vocation to help us to heaven and our spouse and our children. So, Kathleen, as we wrap up, what are some of your favorite pearls that you've learned about parenting through your 7 children so far?
The most important thing is to pray for your children every day and really pray for them. And that God created them exactly who they are for you. One of my favorite quotations is from the mother of Blessed Carlos. And she said, "Of course, I did my very best to raise my son, but his holiness came from God, not from me." And I think as parents, we have to remember that our child's holiness or lack thereof, it comes from God, not us. Now, it's our job to try to get them to heaven and to form them in virtue. But a lot of that, comes, we say nature versus nurture, but a lot of that is God versus nurture. Their holiness comes from them. Their holiness comes from God.
Kathleen, thanks for giving us so many practical tips on raising children and helping to see it from an eternal perspective and not just an earthly perspective.
God bless you so much.
And thank you, viewers, for watching this episode of Vital Signs, your prescription for a healthy family, brought to you by Shalom World TV and the Catholic Medical Association, where we are inspiring physicians to imitate Jesus Christ. Please join us for our next episode and share the good news of Vital Signs with a friend, and may God bless you. I encourage everyone to send us emails with questions that you want to ask medical experts. Please email us at vitalsigns@shalomworld.org. Your questions and comments will help us determine what topics we'll cover in the next season of Vital Signs.
Someone who's used media a lot in evangelization, so I believe in the importance of Catholic radio, Catholic TV, Catholics using the new media. Can I encourage everyone to watch Shalom TV? I think it's a great vehicle of evangelization. And God bless all of you.